Welcome to the inaugural first episode ever of the Sous Chefs. We are partners in law and culinary assassins. I am Kimber A. Russell, Esquire.
I am Robert S. Alexander, also Esquire.
And our challenge is to weekly bring you interesting stories about the legal profession, what we do in our criminal defense practice, and also to talk about the amazing and delectable things that we make. Just to give you a little background on ourselves, I met this man when he was in law school. He was a bar preparation representative for me, my head rep, which ties into what we're going to be talking about this week. And I think we bonded just over our love of cooking.
And the love of the kids.
Absolutely. So later on, Robert is going to tell us about what this week's culinary challenge is and see if he can assassinate me or if I will survive the challenge. And before that, I think what we want to talk about this week is something that is near and dear to my heart because I spent a long time working in the bar prep area. I've basically worked for everybody. I worked for Themis, Kaplan, Barbary, basically the big three. And I spent a lot of time traveling across the country, talking to law students all over the place, selling them a product that they don't want. And this year has been a challenge because the pandemic obviously has made it very difficult for the bar examiners to do a traditional bar exam. So one of the big challenges was whether or not to even hold an in-person bar examination. As of this week, and we are recording on July 31st, as of this week, 22 states in the United States actually went forward with an in-person bar exam, and we'll get into that a little bit, like what the issues were with that. Not the least of which was that it's a global pandemic. But the other issue is that for the states that have decided against doing a in-person bar exam, one of the big things that has come out of this is a huge push for what is known as diploma privilege. You want to tell everybody what diploma privilege is, Rob?
So, we have a state where we have strictly diploma privilege. Wisconsin, you graduate from law school in Wisconsin, you don't have to sit for the bar exam. You pass character and fitness, the MPRE, and you get a license because the law schools prepare you to be an attorney.
And in addition, in Wisconsin, the thing that there's only two law schools in Wisconsin, and that's the University of Wisconsin and Marquette University. And both of those schools, part of the diploma privilege is that you actually are prepared to practice Wisconsin law. You have part of not just the regular ABA required curriculum, but a lot of curriculum that relates specifically to Wisconsin law, which is something that most law schools don't do. And Robert has some very interesting opinions on law school curriculum right now as it stands. So what is the difference between a school that offers diploma privilege and a typical ABA accredited law school?
So looking at law schools throughout the rest of the country besides Wisconsin, you have your standard first year classes, the basics, con law, criminal law, property, torts. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Legal writing, where you learn like the basics of like how to think like a lawyer. Then you just take pretty much whatever you want for 2 more years. You can go and work for somebody you can pay to work for somebody, or you can sit in classes and read, write papers, work on a journal, which not saying that that's not valuable information or experiences, but we left law school without knowing how to be lawyers.
That is an absolute fact. So Robert and I, full transparency, we began a law practice, Vanguard Advocates.
LLP.
And we started a criminal law practice in May of 2019. And I've been out since 2009. But because of the way that the market was at the time, the only job I could really get was selling bar prep. So I did not actually begin my practice of law until I was 10 years out, which is pretty crazy. But I passed the bar exam. I am not ready to practice law by any means. We are learning every single day, and we want to give a big shout out to the Justice Entrepreneurs Project that is a part of the Chicago Bar Foundation, which is another part of the Chicago Bar Association. This is a project. It's an incubator that Robert did the full program. I'm now part of the program, and it's just a way for people who have a social justice um, background and who are motivated to provide legal services to people who wouldn't necessarily have access to them, and just give low cost, great legal services to people. So that's what we're doing. And, part of the issue with access to justice is the bar exam.
Mm.
Now, why do we even have a bar exam, Robert? What is going on here? What is the purpose of a bar exam if you can you go all through law school, and then you still have to go through this one last hurdle? What is it about the bar exam that makes you prepare to practice law?
I would argue not a damn thing. I believe that it's just for gatekeeping purposes. And I think it's the wrong time to do gatekeeping on this profession. And I understand, like, we need something there, but not after people have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. Um, by the time you finish law school, let's say that you like weren't the kid who was able to keep their scholarship all 3 years or never even got a scholarship. Hundreds of thousands of dollars have gone into this education, not counting undergrad debt that a lot of people had. And then we're going to say, well, you need to spend a few $1,000s more applying for this test, then possibly tens of thousands of dollars more preparing for the test, because you're not working most of the time. You might even be living separate from your family, depending on the situation, paying for the bar prep. And then if you don't pass this exam, you don't get to practice law.
Yeah,
You
let's talk about that.
graduated, everything.
Right. Let's talk about now. Here's the we know the bar examination is not something that has always existed. Now, we can actually trace the history of the bar exam back to the 1700s. There were some states that did bar examinations even in the 1700s, but by and large, the practice of law was mostly you would get your license by reading the law, doing some kind of an apprenticeship, or it was through diploma privilege if you did go to some kind of a law school that allowed you to go. Now, we know for a fact that women, black people, Jewish people, non-Anglo-Saxon white men
Mhm.
were typically not permitted to be part of the legal profession.
Our
And
entire law firm.
absolutely, we wouldn't even be here, guys, if it weren't for all of this gatekeeping that was happening. Now, around the 1920s, now many states, Texas, Illinois has done this. A lot of states have offered diploma privilege on and off throughout the centuries in the United States. But around the 1920s, something very interesting happened. At around that time, we had the Depression was coming on, the economy was shifting. There were a lot of immigrants that were coming into the United States, and they were trying to set up law practices to serve their communities. And right around the same time, three black men accidentally were admitted to the American Bar Association for membership. Now, when that happened, the ABA decided, and this is a fact, you can look it up. They actually wrote that they needed to keep the legal they needed to protect the Anglo-Saxon purity of the legal profession. They use those terms
Let's
exactly.
stop there. Let's stop there. They needed to maintain the white racial purity
Yep,
of
the
the
ABA
practice
and the practice
of
of
the
law.
law.
This is a fact. And
That
one way
is
that and that's why they decided to institute all of these additional gatekeeping sort of barriers. So the bar exam, which had been something that some people did, and let's just talk about like what the bar exam actually looked like for some folks. There's a story, it's apocryphal, but it's possibly true, of Abraham Lincoln. Remember that guy? Um, Giving
Land of
somebody the
Lincoln.
Land of Lincoln, Illinois. Our forefather Abraham Lincoln uh, Not as good as Trump. He's not the best president, obviously. He's okay, I suppose. But this guy, he allegedly gave somebody a bar exam while he was in his bath. And remember, like back in the day, you just like you had like a wash tub that was like your bathtub. So he literally is bathing and he's questioning some guy on like, how do you write a contract? What's in a contract? What do you need for a contract? And the guy was like, I guess offer acceptance consideration, like pass the soap. And that guy passed the bar. He said that was his exam. So it was very casual, but it was again, it was about maintaining the white supremacy of the practice. We gotta call it what it is. The bar exam is a tool of white supremacy, and that's what it's always been. Now, if you listen, and I would like to say that I have become radicalized over these last few weeks and months watching, and I want to shout out to Alyssa Leader, Maggie McGuire. Um, these are just a couple of Jay Carver. Like, there's a ton. Tom McMaster's. Like, there's so many people that I follow on Twitter who have been advocates and proponents and actually mobilizing students for diploma privilege just because of the barriers. And we beginning to realize how inequitable and unfair the legal profession is before you even step foot in a courtroom, before you even get to be to get that license in your hand. There are so many barriers that are set up, and we're really now starting to interrogate why those barriers are even there. And the number one reason, it's white supremacy.
It is. And I just think that we need to like really think about when, because I posted on Facebook, because I love a good Facebook rant. Um, I posted that we need to get rid of the bar exam. Now, you obviously know I've been saying this shit for years. Before I passed it, when I passed it, and I'll continue to say it. We need to get rid of the bar exam. And, I asked people, why are you wedded to it? A guy was like, no, there's too many diploma meals. Okay, I won't argue with that. I haven't read those numbers, but let's say that that's true. This is not the time to gatekeep. The time to gatekeep was when those schools were going through their accreditation processes, when they were vetting students, you know, vet students beforehand. Talk to people, but also put the onus on the law schools. People are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for an education to learn to practice law, and they're not learning it. Like, why are you leaving law school? Why did we leave law school feeling totally unprepared to
Right,
practice law?
right.
Like, thank God for the JEP, because like it gave us resources to build the confidence and the knowledge. But why didn't we get that in law school? And it's not like we
Well,
didn't do internships, but our
right.
law school wasn't set up for that.
Well, law school was never set up. Law the We basically have a system that was set up in the late 1800s. Harvard Law School, Christopher Columbus Langdell was the guy who actually created that Socratic method of teaching where we primarily learn the law by reading appellate opinions and dissecting them and figuring out how the law came to be and how and why the law is the way it is. We it was another barrier create because so many people were not able to even get into college because they were a woman or a black or Jewish or whatever, anything besides white Anglo-Saxon male. They had to keep putting more and more barriers.
Mm-hmm.
So once people were allowed to be in college, okay, now you got to go to law school. Oh, but you can't go to law school if you're black. And when they finally did start letting black people into law school, they had to like sit in a desk at the back of the room and nobody would talk to them even if they like graduated at the top of their class. And then okay, so now we got black attorneys. Oh, but in order to get a license, you have to be a member of a bar association. We don't let black people into the bar association. And then okay, now they're in the bar association. Well, shit, now what do we do? Bar exam. Okay, yes, let's do that. Yet another thing. And let's just talk about the continuing cost of being a lawyer, the fees that you have to pay every year to keep the attorney registration board in money, the fees that you have to pay for the continuing legal education. That's kind of a racket because literally you can have it running in the background of your computer and not pay attention, and most people really don't. So there's a cost to practicing law, and it's a privilege to become an attorney. And part of the problem is that these gatekeeping, like every single barrier that we've knocked down, that we've overcome, you still have to have a certain level of privilege in order to step over that. Like
Hmm.
you had to go to Morehouse. I mean, you had to get an education. You had to go through all this stuff, and you still have hella debt, right?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
Don't even think about it. But like,
I don't.
I mean, I would, if you don't mind discussing a little bit about, and I think this really hit home for me because I think I sat in on the public comments Zooms that they were having in California and Texas, and there might have been a call in Florida. I've sat in on a bunch wherever there's an open meetings law, and the disdain, the disrespect, the absolute and utter lack of empathy that these boards are showing for people has just been breathtaking and mind-boggling. And in a sense, I'm not shocked, but in another, I'm deeply shocked to my core. The way that like robots, they just keep saying, "We need a bar exam to protect the public. We need a bar exam to protect the public. We need to ensure minimum competence." But when you ask someone, well, what does that constitute? What is minimum competence?
Hmm.
We need a bar exam to protect minimum competence. Like, they will not tell you what that means because they can't articulate it. But
Hmm.
when you look at the people who are unsuccessful on the bar exam, Robert, can you tell me why people are unsuccessful on the bar exam by and large?
Well, because people don't have time or resources to study. I mean, let's be real. I took the bar exam in 2014. I was working two jobs, working hella overtime. And then honestly, because I'm a good test taker and I just didn't realize the level of study I needed to do for the bar exam. I cracked that book open, what, 2 weeks before the bar exam,
Yes, you
and was
did.
in for a world of hurt,
Yeah.
completely and utterly confused. And then
Right.
and then I sat for the bar exam. And this is a person who like had just recently graduated from law school, great at taking exams. I mean, not to toot my own horn too much, but like, I'm just being real. And so I went and I took this exam. I didn't pass, but I mean, I did a pretty good job for not having studied. Imagine if
You
I
came
had had time
close.
to study,
You
you
came really
know?
close. Yeah.
And so
Let's
when
just
I
talk
finally
about,
did study, I was able to pass. But think
right.
about the sacrifices that were made for me to be able to study.
Yeah. And as a person, like, when you this is the privilege that we're talking about here, because the bar examiners are still coming from a place of privilege. Most of the people, and I'm not going to say that every single person on the board of bar examiners is like this, but the vast majority of them seem to be living in a world where I've never had access to, where they just assume that you shut everything down, you do not work, you do not have any other commitments during the bar prep period. For 8 to 10 weeks, you are studying every single day, maybe take one day a week off, but not much, and you're studying minimum 6 hours a day up to 10 hours a day
Mhm.
without bringing, and they also expect you to take out loans for this period. Not only that, but you must also, again, because law schools are so great at preparing people for law, they're also not great at preparing people for the bar exam. So people take a bar preparation course that can cost thousands of dollars, and you're out all of this money before you've even stepped foot in a court. Not to mention the fact that when you sit for the bar exam in July or in February, and I was a winter taker because I died that time. That's another story for another podcast. We'll get into that later. But I had to take the February exam, so I got my results in April and I was sworn in May. If you take the July bar, you usually get your results around October, but you're not sworn in until November. So that's at least 6 months from graduation where you are not able to make any kind of money other than working a non-legal job or interning or doing something where you're getting like an hourly rate. You're not able to work like an attorney, and it's really hard. Like, I was a non-traditional student. A lot of people who, especially part-time students, but typically people who have families or working women, single mothers, they do not give you the accommodations that you need. It's just, sorry, screw you. And the idea that everybody has access to this, And in the middle of a pandemic, we still expect people to be doing the exact same things when people do not have a quiet place in their house. People do not have robust internet access. And especially like you're from Kansas City, a lot of people are from rural Missouri or rural New Hampshire, various other places where we don't have a robust internet. You might not
Hmm.
even be able to get a phone service. So getting into we it's already inequitable under the best circumstances. And I want to bring back you first took the bar exam in 2014. That was Barpocalypse. Can you tell us what
Oh,
happened during Barpocalypse 2014?
I completely forgot about that.
I didn't.
So, is it exams?
It was exam soft.
Okay, yeah, exam soft. I don't know what was going on there. Maybe they had a server issue or something, but nobody could upload exams. We couldn't leave the testing site for, I think it was like an hour that we had to stay after while they conferred and figured out like whether we had all failed, I guess, or whether they would let us upload it later, if we could go home and upload it or what. They finally let us go home and upload it. I mean, Twitter was in shambles. Like, it was in shambles. People were crying on the internet. Facebook, I just had to get off social media because I was like, y'all, we just took the bar exam. Y'all are like not stressed. Like, I want to go eat a burger and hang out. I don't want to think about this ever again until October. But I just like, luckily, I was able to get home, use the internet, and upload it. But I mean, it was, people were stressed. I, I just feel like people were like losing their minds and crying. And I was just like, you know me, it's hard to get me too flustered, especially when there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just like, all right, we just gonna make it work. But I do understand the frustration that people felt. You know, I don't think I felt the same level of frustration because at the time I didn't want to be a lawyer. I was taking the bar exam because I had gone to law school and I had a law degree, and I was like, okay, let's finish this. But you know, I was a chef, so I was like, whatever. I gotta go to work tomorrow, y'all. Like, enjoy this. But I got to upload it. But just like, but going back to what you said about like the amount of like resources and time that people put into this, like that was super stressful, and that was like a normal administration, except for like the exam soft failure. But that got resolved. People got their scores, people passed, whatever. But just like the amount of stress that people go through during a regular administration of the bar exam, and people, I don't know who these people are or what planet they live on, because it's clearly not Earth in the middle of a pandemic. You expect people to, you won't give people enough information to make actual plans. So people are studying for the bar exam like they're going to take it in person in July. Okay, everything gets like postponed. You don't know if there's going to be an in-person exam. Okay, so there's going to be an in-person exam. Okay, what are the procedures? Where are we taking it? Oh, we don't know. You don't need to know until we tell you. Just do what you got to do. Okay, is it going to be postponed? We haven't decided. Just pretend that it's going to be here in July and we'll let you know. So people study preparing for July. Okay, it gets booted back. Okay. Or it gets moved online. Nobody's prepared for an online bar exam. Like, we, sure, you may do some of it on your computer, but it's not a remote exam.
Right. And I want to get back to let's talk about the beginning of the pandemic back in March. Now March 13th was kind of around that time where things were starting to shut down here in Chicago where we're located. That's when the governor was closing like Illinois buildings and some of the local like town hall or like things were starting to get shut down. That was actually the last day that I stepped foot downtown. That was the last day that I worked on site. It was the last day I had a coffee, y'all. Don't get me started. I'm gonna martyr myself on this, but but not like I need the caffeine. But that was around the time where within about a week or two, and I would say that would be like end of March, early April. Um, that was when a white paper was written by a lot of academics who basically came up with a variety of options. People were thinking about what are we going to do in the middle of a pandemic for the bar exam because people are at that point law schools were starting to go online, and there was a big concern about how do we grade people during a pandemic. And there were a lot of law schools who were like, screw you, it's going to be over Zoom, but it's going to be regular. Some schools immediately went to um, mandatory pass fail. Some schools tried to give you a choice, which obviously forces people to make a decision like, oh, so I don't really have a situation where I can study for a high stakes exam, like a final exam right before graduation. So I'm going to take that pass, but our employer's going to look down on me because I took a
Right.
P. And this is the kind of stuff. These were the arguments that people were having in the middle of a pandemic. People are dying, and they're like, yeah, but Big Law's not going to hire me if I have a pass. So once Harvard and Yale and all these other schools started doing mandatory grading, mandatory pass fail, that's when most of the states went fell in line. But there's still some law schools that required you to choose for pass fail, or they didn't give you a pass fail option. That was some of the
Mhm.
southern schools were like that. But right around that time, that white paper came out, and the white paper actually went through about, I want to say it was like 6 different options. They're like, well, we can do nothing and have an in-person exam and like put some mask, slap a mask on it and do some social distancing, which 22 states this week did.
Mhm.
um, or we can consider doing some kind of apprenticeship program, some kind of supervised practice where you take a bar exam later. We could consider doing, maybe an open book bar exam because that's more indicative of what you actually do in legal practice.
I'm
Or,
sorry. What the hell is an open book bargain? Go
oh,
on, but
we're going
let's
to get to
discuss
that
that.
when we talk about Indiana. We will be talking about the open book bar exam that's going to be happening shortly. But for the main thing that was coming out was diploma privilege, because we've seen it work in Wisconsin. And I want to just get to this fact right now, because a lot of people who were like, yeah, well, if Wisconsin has diploma privilege, shouldn't they have a higher level of attorney complaints and sanctions? No, they do not. And they've actually done this. They've looked at the various states where they have bar exam requirements and the states that don't, and they've looked at the type of complaints that they have. They've even gone down into that granular detail to see how many first year attorneys are getting a complaint. And it's not a thing. The major reason that people are complaining about attorneys is what, Robert?
Lack of preparation.
Lack of communication too, right? Like not communicating with your
Yeah.
client, like maybe not showing up at a court date that you were supposed to show up at, or showing up
Yes.
late, or just not telling people, not preparing them, not giving them inadequate,
Yeah.
like, customer service is the number
Not
one
letting people
reason.
know that you're actually their attorney still.
Right? That's a problem. But in Wisconsin, and another thing is, the people who get the bulk of these complaints across the board, and you can look at the stats on this, it's people who are out like more than 10 years. It's not in the first 1 through 5 years that people are going out and making a ton of crazy errors. I'm not saying that there aren't some people who are doing that, but for the most part, it's people who are 10 years out, 15 years out, 20 years
Hmm.
out. Because we know a lot of these older attorneys, even though the rules of professionalism require them to understand like new rules of law and new technologies, they just don't bother themselves to learn these things. And that's where they're getting themselves in trouble, by not understanding how evidence can be gleaned, like from text messages or from social
Hmm.
media, from various things like that. So when diploma privilege came out as an obvious choice, you would think that that's when the bar examiners would like leap into action, right? They would get ready to go, and they would just be like, "Yeah, man, we're gonna make a decision. We're gonna make a decision now. It's April 2020, in the middle of a global pandemic. We're gonna get in on this shit right now. We're activate." That did not happen at all. Not even a
Nope.
little bit. Um, so here's what happened. So shortly, and it took some time, because at this point, I believe the 3Ls, the people who were getting ready to graduate, were mostly trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do about their grades. Are they going to take these
Right.
finals? Are they going to take a pass? What's going to happen? How are they going to complete their studies? Because uh, most law professors that I had could barely work the microphone in their room if they were using a microphone, let alone a PowerPoint presentation. So moving completely onto Zoom would have been a hot mess, and I just know that people were having a lot of trouble dealing with this. So that
Hmm.
people weren't really, they were thinking about the bar exam, but I think they figured that something fair and equitable, or at least human, right, would
Hmm.
happen. So it wasn't until I want to say around May or so, that we started seeing states say, okay, we're going to postpone. And in Illinois, they decided to postpone the exam until September. That was when it was going to happen. A lot of states did that. I think New York did that. Various states decided they would postpone. Some states decided they wouldn't postpone at all, like the 22 states that went forward this week, like North Carolina, Virginia, Colorado. A bunch of states like that decided that they would not. Now, something interesting happened though in Utah, Washington, and Oregon State. They adopted emergency diploma privilege. And when that happened, around that time, that's when I think people really started getting excited. And that's when you saw folks like Alyssa Leader and Molly McGuire and all these other, there's tons of folks from various states. And you've got like Bar Exam Tracker. I'm going to give a shout out to you because you guys have been keeping it, like they've been following everything. There's a lot of really great resources on Twitter, and people have been getting together, United for Diploma Privilege. These folks all got together, and these are people who are studying for the bar exam right now. They've been studying since May, you guys. People graduate from law school in May, okay? They've been studying since May for an exam that has not yet happened for over half of the country. And they got together and they mobilized. They created like petitions. They petitioned Supreme Courts of their state. In California, they actually got together and wrote over 400-page report, and they did not like Pilar. I can't remember your last name. I'm sorry, Pilar. But Pilar is one of the founding members of that push in Chicago, or sorry, California. I'm in Chicago, California, and she actually had been working with some of the folks in California, in on the Northwest side, who actually were successful in getting diploma privilege, even though that was a huge fight. And if you can listen to some podcasts that from like Above the Law this week, where they actually talked about that. It was a huge fight, even in the Northwest, where they have some kind of more relaxed approach to licensing attorneys. But Pilar is a PhD in addition to being a JD, so this woman knows her stuff. And they all got together and wrote this huge report talking about all the issues with the bar exam, issues with going remote, and basically they were just completely disregarded, and just the disdain. Like, for example, on the Texas call that I watched, where they actually impact statement after impact statement. People are coming in saying, my auntie and uncle died, or I have children that I don't have childcare for. I've been trying to homeschool them while studying for the bar exam, and I'm separated from my partner because my partner works in healthcare, so they have to quarantine. They're living in a trailer on the front lawn. Like, all of these stories. We have another issue is disabled and special needs people who need accommodations, lactating people, and people who have periods. These have all been issues that have not been properly addressed. And the bar examiners, literally, some of them were falling asleep on the call. There were 2 people, and we got the receipts because those folks were immediately screenshotted and put all over the interwebs. And not only that, but we also have people, like, some of these folks were just rolling their eyes and just completely taking no time to listen. They were giving people 1 minute to read their impact statements, and if you could have heard the passion, but also the persuasiveness. These folks all made arguments that a lawyer
Right.
could make, right? And I feel like they've already shown. The fact that they've actually gotten petitions all the way up to the Supreme Court and they're not even licensed attorneys tells you they're ready to go.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the problems with in-person testing right now, because we did just have in-person testing. So, Robert, what do you think some of the problems might be with having an in-person test during a pandemic?
Asymptomatic people can spread the virus,
Yeah,
and inadequate social distancing, just the overall lack of hygiene, cleanliness, care for other humans, the fact that some people don't drive, so they might take public transportation. All these points of contact with other people that we should not have during a global viral pandemic that we've
right.
all lived through for several months now. I didn't become aware of it until March, but it's now July. Well, August is tomorrow. So we've known about this for quite some time. It's mind-boggling to me that we've had all of this time where we literally shut down our country for the most part. And the board of bar examiners across the country were like, yep, this is cool. We should definitely not change anything. Or just the lack of forethought, like, is what's, these are people who are making policy and who are supposed to be protecting the public from the mistakes that can happen in our profession, which I'm not downplaying that at all. Like, they're serious issues. But when these are the people protecting us and they don't have the ability to think forward, look ahead, plan, and make changes while simultaneously requiring other people to be able to make those on a dime pivots, is completely bizarre. I would argue inhuman and definitely despicable.
Right. And
Like,
despicable is 100% right, because I would like to talk about what actually happened on the ground during the bar exams that were held this week on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Colorado.
Colorado comes to mind. Why Colorado, Robert?
Well, as you told me before, bar exams are looking like super spreader events. The testing regimes are clearly inadequate, or people are not being told about testing. I'm not sure, but this person gets tested, they don't get a result, they go and take the bar exam in person in Colorado. Was that the second day or the day after the second day? They
I
got their
think it
results
was.
back saying
I
that it
think it.
was positive.
Yeah, I think it was after the second day.
So
So
they've sat
yeah,
through the entire bar exam.
right, right. And they took the bar exam, I believe, at Sturm Law School, and they had. I know that they were putting people in smaller rooms, but the issue again is that you're in a small room for at least 8 hours. Now let's talk about how. Like, I want to talk about some of the logistics because it was different from state to state. Before people even got there, we had a huge controversy just about menstrual products because for some reason, and God knows why. I don't know why in a pandemic they decided to focus on this, but for some reason they decided to really come down on people who menstruate. And some states, I believe Tennessee might have been one, Arizona might have been. There were a few different states that were having in-person exams that basically said you may not bring in any kind of menstrual products at all. Uh, and they didn't give a reason, but again, like it sounded like they were saying that the reason that they weren't going to let people bring menstrual products in is because people were going to cheat. So what do the women do and the people who have periods do? These folks got together and immediately started writing evidence on a tampon or like personal jurisdiction on a panty liner or something, because for there are literally people who think like, and to me it comes down to, I really think they were worried about protecting IP, because these people really think that we are stuffing cameras up our vaginas and we're going to whip it out so that we can steal all the bar stuff or somehow cheat with a bloody tampon. I don't know if people understand how tampons work, honestly. I don't know if they know what they do or how they work, or if the woman's body just has a way of shutting it all down.
Oh
But
my God, Tired
uh
Asian.
well, I know this is like, and I've told this story many times on Twitter, but I'm going to tell it one more time because I think it's indicative of how for people who menstruate, the bar exam is a problem. And the reason is, even if you are able to bring in your own menstrual products, and in many states they require you to bring everything in a clear plastic bag, which means everybody knows your goddamn business because they see you've got
Mm-hmm.
18 jumbo freaking extra absorbent tampons in there, or like a panty liner that is the size of Utah, right? Because like if you got a heavy flow. So um I and Robert knows my story, but I was so stressed out from the process of studying for the bar exam that I stopped menstruating completely for the duration. So from January of 2009 until the end of February. So I didn't get my period for that whole time. And on the first day of the bar exam, somewhere between the last Illinois essay and the middle of the MPT, it was like The Shining
Oh
in
my
my
dear.
pantaloons,
Oh
and I
dear.
just I just bled right through my panties and my pants and possibly the chair. I didn't look, but it was literally like
Wow.
And the problem is because of the way that they put time breaks and stuff in there, like you're not allowed to like go to the bathroom when they switch over. So like between the morning session and the MPT, you're not allowed to go to the bathroom, which would have been perfect time to go take care of what I needed to do, but I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to just sit there and bleed through my pants for 90 minutes because I mean, the only time they allow you to leave the room is actually during the test. And then you still have to
Mm-hmm.
wait like 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes into the test before they let you leave. And they won't let you leave before they've collected all the papers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows your business. Like the proctor has to take you in there and you got to like let them know what's going on. You got to ask them for your tampon or whatever. So it's humiliating and embarrassing. And that's during the regular bar exam. That's not what's happening this year. This year, they told the ladies, we're just going to have a big old bowl of tampons out there. So just help yourselves. It's great. Well, here's the thing. Not everybody uses the same products. Not
Right.
everybody's body is the same. And for people who menstruate, who are non-binary or who are trans or whatever, they're not necessarily using the bathroom that has the tampons in it. So how are
Right.
those people going to get their stuff? So we actually got a lot of people together signing petitions, and we were able to lobby a lot of these bar examiners to just let people bring in whatever. But they still wanted you to show them in the bag what it was and to explain what it was. So you still had to bring like an entire box of Tampax in there with you and let people know all your business. Another issue, lactating mothers. Typically, now in Illinois, they provide an accommodation. They give you they'll put you in your own hotel room, and there'll be a proctor there, and you get 30-minute pumping breaks, and it's totally cool. But this year, oh no, you just got to bring your pump in and pump right there. There was no accommodation made at all for lactating mothers for various states. So that's another issue. This is leave aside the sanitation issue. So another issue was check this out. North Carolina.
Oh my God.
They administer the bar exam in a fairgrounds. First day of the bar exam, the state of North Carolina canceled the annual state fair for COVID-19, but not the bar exam that's held at the state fairgrounds. And they showed a picture that was like socially distancing, but they had this huge space, but the tables were still organized much too close, I thought. And they put people on either end of a table facing each other, and it's not like they had a plexiglass barrier, but they literally were facing each other. Totally crazy. But apparently there were issues all day we saw on Twitter where people weren't able to, they were taking people's temperatures. And I'd like to point out that the person in Colorado, and I'm not casting aspersions on this person at all because they took the test in anticipation of another procedure that was going to happen and they just
Mm-hmm.
happened to get the result. So they didn't know and they were asymptomatic and they were properly taken care of. Like they were doing everything right, but what choice did they have, right?
Yeah.
So they passed the temperature check. But there were a lot of people who may or may not be symptomatic. We don't know because people aren't getting tested. Who were either like the temperature gauges they were using were clearly not functioning very well because they were
Right.
saying that everybody was 101 degrees or that this one person was only 90 degrees. And this guy literally is like, I went out and did some jumping jacks. I came back. I was 93 degrees. They told me I had to go back out and get down to 92 degrees or something. Like, I don't know what was going on.
What?
It was crazy, Robert. It was insane. There was so much. They had people lined up outside in the hotness, like taking their temperatures. In one state they had people were supposed to be staggered going in. So like, yeah, like you might have to come in at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. and then sit at a table and wait until the test began for hours. And for their bathroom breaks were a problem because they were telling people you had to sit at a table silently and not have bathroom breaks forever. And apparently the system broke down very quickly. It went from being everybody's wearing their mask to we actually have pictures of the proctors in North Carolina not wearing masks, touching their faces, kikiing over here in the corner. Apparently in one state, I think it might have been Virginia, maybe it was North Carolina, you couldn't bring your own water. You had to stand in line and let somebody hand you a cone of water that you had to drink in front of them before you could leave. The lines for the bathrooms were not socially distanced. They were crossing off sinks so people wouldn't be washing their hands next to each other, but then they would dump all the towels in one area so people had to pass each other to get the towels. Anyway, That is just the live version, y'all. We haven't even got to the remote.
We should not be having a bar exam.
Oh,
People should
but
have gotten people should have gotten at least provisional diploma privilege. Like, y'all, it's a global pandemic. Like, y'all, like, come on, let's be human about this. Like, I know lawyers are not human. Like, I get it, we're vampires, robots, whatever. But like, sometimes we gotta be human, y'all. Like, what is happening?
right. And like the states, like, so for example, Illinois extended the 7 license that we have typically is something that if you're a second year law student, you can get your 7-Eleven license, and that enables you to practice like pro bono as an attorney, but for like you can work at the state's attorney's office or as a
Mhm.
or the public defender's office or for a pro bono organization or legal aid organization. So in their great wisdom, the Supreme Court of Illinois said, "Oh, yeah, now you can be a 7-Eleven lawyer at a law firm." Well, that's all great and all, but you're not an attorney, and that still means you still have to take a bar exam. So
Mhm.
there is a problem with provisional licensing in that it means people are going to be put in a situation just like you were, where if you're not taking the bar exam right after law school, when you're prepared, when you've taken time off to study, which you didn't have that luxury, but a lot of people do have the privilege. But this would mean, okay, so we give you provisional license or some kind of supervised license, but some of the states are saying, yeah, here's the choice. You can have a provisional license. You need to get a mentor. You need to get somebody to supervise you, and you have to take a bar exam by the end of 2021.
Of course, I think the bar exam shouldn't exist. Everybody should get a license. But I'm just saying that since I think that it would have been fine if they had just been like, look, not extend the 7-Eleven, like create a new class. I mean, we let lawyers come in, talk to somebody, talk to the board of bar examiners, get a little license, practice law for a little bit, and then leave. Like, we do that already. There's no reason that they couldn't come up with something in the months between graduation and July to accommodate these people, allow them to stay safe, and continue working on the problem. Now, our alma mater apparently sent out emails to alumni saying, hey, our recent grads need experience. They're willing to work for free or for pay. They just need experience. And I'm just like, do y'all hear yourselves? Like, does anybody read? Like, is anybody understanding what this actually means for the humans involved? These people just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars going through school. A lot of people like gave up earnings to do this degree. A lot of people paid to work for people already. Now you're calling us and saying, telling us like, hey, your fellow grads need your help, but they'll work for free. Like,
Yeah.
what? So now
Yeah.
you're just trying to make us all complicit in exploiting people? You
Right.
know what I'm
And
saying?
I'm not
Like,
interested. And not only that, but another thing they were saying, so if you're not able to sit for the, because like a lot of people, especially before Illinois decided to go to the remote option, which only happened a couple weeks ago,
mm-hmm.
before Illinois went remote, they literally were doing the same thing. Like they couldn't get enough proctors to proctor the exam, so they literally were telling like recent grads who decided that they didn't want to take the exam for health reasons, well, make some money by proctoring the exam. Or they were coming after alumni saying you should proctor the exam, and it was like some ridiculous hourly amount. Not as bad as Florida. Florida wants people to proctor the exam for free. Now, this is an online test. I believe they've gone online, but they want people to proctor that for free. Like, it can be any kind of person from any kind of place, that they don't seem to have to be attorneys. It could just be any old Joe who walks in there, and all you have to do is agree to sit through all these trainings and then sit through 2 days where you're literally staring at people. Now, this brings up the issues with remote exams. Now, I know that a lot of people are like, well, we've all been doing Zoom ad nauseum. We've been going hard on Zoom. So clearly, technology is magic and solves all problems of humans.
Sure.
So a remote exam is a totally viable alternative. And we have vendors who have been handling at least the portion of the bar exam that's taken on the computer, ExamSoft and ILG Technologies. But Robert, what are the problems with remote bar exams?
Well, my biggest issue is letting this surveillance equipment into your home. Also, let's say that you decide to use AI. AI is well known to be racist. Um, but also like watching people, the very strict restrictions on movement, um, not being able to use scratch paper, um, the failures of our technological infrastructure, which are known the world around and experienced by everyone, but everything is counting against the exam takers.
Yeah.
Nothing is the fault of anyone. Everything is the fault of the exam takers. If the technology doesn't recognize your black face, your fault. If the technology thinks that you're moving, but really you just like are reading your page, you're wrong. If you move out of frame because you bump your computer, your fault. You know, if your internet goes down because let's say Comcast or whoever is upgrading the network, trying to accommodate all of this stuff, but you know your stuff goes down for more than whatever the allotted time is, you're screwed. And it's an automatic fail. After you spend all this money, wasted all this time, you 10 minutes is enough for you to just like fail. Like, come on
Right. And it's really distressing too, because the amount of restrictions that they've put on people is beyond belief to me. And like literally like twirling your hair. Now I'm a notorious hair twirler. I don't have much,
now.
but I will twirl it. Robert's a hair twirler too, and a
Mhm.
beard twirler. What and it's like you were saying, like we know that AI is racist. It's not just that, but so there were a couple high profile failures of technology with the American Board of Surgeons had a test. There was also the ACT had some issues. The online LSAT had issues. But I want to talk about the Board of Surgeons, because that's another hugely high stakes test. These are people who have spent years and years and years studying, and it's the same thing like the bar exam, because they're having to spend weeks and weeks studying and preparing for this exam. Now this was a 2-day test. On the first day test they had a lot of technical problems, and in the middle of the second day they just canceled it. Just they couldn't finish it. And part of the problem was the AI. Now, not only now when you install, and now Tom McMasters, who is like a computer genius, and attorney, and an IP attorney, who has written extensively on this, I want to give him a shout out. He actually detailed all the issues with installing these programs on your computer. And the issue is they can give root control. When you put one of these programs on your computer, it's enabling anybody to come in and see everything on your computer and all of your information. Like identity theft is just the beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg. They can get into all of your stuff. They can take all your stuff. And the thing is, the way that this AI is working, depending on which company, either it's AI or it's a human proctor who's literally watching you through the camera. Now, for the board of surgeons, it was humans who were watching. And immediately after, some of the women who were taking the test were contacted on social media, on Facebook or wherever, on Instagram, wherever they were. These guys, because they knew who you were, the proctors had all of your identifying information. The proctors were given all of your information, and you literally had to show them your ID and stuff. Like you had to keep, like, this is part of the problem we were talking about. Like they have sections of tests, and you're constantly having to log in again and prove your identity again, and people are literally like showing their driver's licenses and stuff. So these proctors, we don't know who the hell they are. They're not doctors. They're not like people that necessarily have a vested interest in the profession. They're just like whoever, Joe Schmo. These
Mhm.
people were stalking these women and trying to hit them up online and slide into their DMs and everything and harassing them. And within minutes and hours of this happening, people were finding like all kinds of crazy charges. Their computers were crashing. There was all kinds of havoc that happened on the surgeon's exam. And this kind of feeds into what happened on Tuesday in Michigan. So Michigan is the
Mm.
first state that actually succeeded in having an exam online, and they were using ExamSoft. And the way that it was supposed to work was you would have to, at the appointed time, and again, there were maybe only a few hundred takers in Michigan. It's not as big of a jurisdiction as like New York, which has like 10,000 takers. But in Michigan, so ExamSoft set it up so that you would have to log into their website, and you would have to get a password from them. You would use that password to log into each section, you would do the section, and then you would log in, you would turn it in, and you would get the next password for the next section and start that. Now the problem is, immediately as soon as the test started, it crashed the server and people weren't able to get in. So this is going all over the interweb. It's on Twitter, it's on Reddit, it's on Facebook, it's everywhere, and people are freaking out. The lines are jammed. Hardly anybody can get through to ExamSoft. The Supreme Court of Michigan is not putting out any information. People don't know what's happening. People are literally freaking out. They don't know if they're losing time. They don't know if they're going to be automatically failed if they can't log in. They don't know what's going on. So people go on Twitter. Twitter is blowing up. Some people were told on customer service, the people that were able to get through to ExamSoft were given the password to log in and were told, share this to everybody, share this on social media. And I want to point out, the part of the reason why they have resisted doing remote examinations for all these years was for security purposes, right? And yet on this day, not only did they say, spread it around, tell everybody the password. Let me tell you what some of these passwords look like. Blue, 12, red, 34, orange, 56, yellow, 78. These were literally the passwords. So after about a half hour or 45 minutes of this shenanigans, ExamSoft literally posted on their website, the password for the next session is orange 42. So eventually, people got emails.
Not even have a password.
That was how they set it up, because they promised the security and there wouldn't be cheating and all this stuff. But like at this point, like people are flipping out. So if this had happened to me, I would have been so flustered. I don't know if I would have been able I don't know if I would have been able to like dial it back and just focus in on the exam. But it got worse because throughout the day, ExamSoft was radio silent for a long time, and then they successively put out 3 different statements. The first statement was, it's a glitch, y'all. Glitch, please. The second statement was, it was a sophisticated cyber attack. It was a denial of service attack. So sophisticated, y'all. And they never said they were sorry. They never apologized, but they basically tried to claim that somebody was trying to stop it. But Tom McMasters, who has written not 1, but 2 very thorough Google Docs, that are basically going through all the reasons why this basically was just everybody signing in at the same time and it crashed their servers. These folks still had to put up with this. And I'd like to point out, ExamSoft is the same purveyor of Barpocalypse 2014. It's the same purveyor that has lost people's results before, caused all kinds of problems. ILG Technologies is another purveyor of this software, which actually a couple years ago, I believe it was in North Carolina. Correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, in the comments, but they told at least 70 people that they had failed the bar exam when they hadn't. And then let me tell you about how insidious these third-party vendors are. Because when you use them as a bar taker, you are not in contract privity with them. They have a contract with the bar examiners, not you. So when these folks sued for relief because they had been licensed attorneys for a year or 2 or more, and had actually sat for another bar exam because they were told they had failed and they had gone through all of the cost and all of the bullshit when they had been attorneys the whole time. When they sued, they lost because they were not in privity of contract with that company. The company did not have any duty to them at all. So they had no relief.
What a load.
That's Michigan. Let's talk about Nevada and Indiana, because you were talking about the open book. So Indiana and Nevada were supposed to have started this week. They were supposed to do a remote exam. Now, I think it was last week. It might have been a week before. Y'all can correct me in the comments or whatever. But they started doing these practice tests. Now, ILG Technologies is doing the Nevada exam. I'm not sure if Indiana was also ILG or if it was ExamThought. I think it's ILG. So they had these practice tests that you were supposed to take. Now, both Indiana and Nevada had issues with these practice tests. Mm-hmm. So Nevada, when the first practice test happened, it crashed their servers immediately. So they had to delay and have another practice test, which also didn't go great. But what Nevada was basically saying is, we're going to kind of watch and see what Indiana does and let them be the guinea pigs. Let that, because basically they just postponed the exam. They're like, we're going to try and figure this out, but let's see what Indiana does. See how that goes for them. Let them be the guinea pigs. Indiana said, no, nuh-uh, player, because here's what's happening. We couldn't get our test to work either. So we're making that shit open book.
But like, what the hell does that even mean? I'm sorry. Like, I'm thinking back to when I took the bar exam. Like, I'm even thinking about my practice exams. When I literally had books sitting next to me, what the idea that I'm going to flip through these giant ass books that are not tabbed, not prepared for this in any way, it's ridiculous. Like, what does that even mean?
Right. So they said this week, and I believe it might have been Tuesday. I think it might have been actually the same day that Michigan had that entire like horrifying experience, and then that put people on notice. We've been telling them this whole time, screaming into the void, saying it's not going to work. It's not going to work. The technology's not there. It won't work. Not only is it unfair and inequitable, it's just not feasible. It won't work. How many Zoom calls have you been on where you froze? I mean, this happened every single time we had one of those open comments periods in Florida, in California. Somebody had Zoom problems.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just talking about whether or not we should have a bar exam. That wasn't the actual bar, y'all. It's Zoom. Everybody's using it. So Indiana says that, and it was like a 2-page order. They're like, use whatever you want. Use any sources, anything that you want. And again, this puts people at a disadvantage who don't have like a massive store of every kind of study aid. Because I know some people will just set up and take like, okay, I'll take Barbary, Kaplan, whatever. Some people might think that they just got a box of Barbary books from like, 2 or 3 administrations ago. They'll try and use that.
Mm-hmm.
Or some people might have Adaptabar or flashcards or who knows what they're using. But they said you could use any of those resources and just no working together, y'all. Don't do it. It's cheating. It's terrible. And also they want people to snitch. They've literally been like, all of these people are like, you better snitch. If you know if anybody is cheating on any of this, you better get ready to snitch. Like they literally are setting people up. They want people to snitch on each other for whatever. And I'm not saying that at this point, if I were a bar taker, I wouldn't be like, screw it. You know what? Let's just all get together and like tab everything, figure out a system when the question comes out, we are ready to go. And it's a blood pact and we will never speak of it. I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't do it because this is crazy. Nobody has prepared. Like, let's talk again about this whole scratch paper thing because the lack of scratch paper for the remote option has been huge. Because when you take, I don't care what bar prep you take, the bulk of these bar prep companies are going to tell you, you need to be in there diagramming things, highlighting things, circling things, crossing things out. When you've got the MPT, you got to rip that book apart, reorganize it. You need to be highlighting and cutting in things out. And even though we technically take the bar exam online, we're literally just using ExamSoft to tippity type things into a very basic word processor. It's not, even the questions are given to you in a paper booklet.
Mm-hmm.
And you're able to write on the booklet like, issue? You're able to write your outline. You're able to diagram things. Now, why might you need to diagram or outline things, Robert?
So that you can organize things and get your points?
So this is the thing. They've been for the paper for the open book test, people have not been preparing for an open book test. And you've taken open book tests.
Yes,
How is it?
You study completely differently.
Yeah, what's the difference between a closed book and an open book? Why is this still a problem if you're only giving people like a week or two to completely change gear?
Well, I mean, for me, it will be one, which book? Like, which books do I want? But also, I mean, I'm just thinking about the bar exam, like the nature of it, like the MBE, like the random essays, like the whole thing is like a triage. Like, okay, this is what this state usually is doing. They've done this recently. Let's tackle that. But if that's how you've been studying, and now they're like, oh, well, you can do open book. Well, all the stuff you neglected, all the stuff you focused on, like, it's like, well, damn, I didn't need to necessarily triage that. I should have been doing everything equally and pointing out like, here's this major issue, there's that major issue, you know. But also, I just think it adds, as you said, to the inequity of it all. Like, some people have all day, all week, whatever, to sit there and go through a book and tab it out. When I took the bar exam, the time that I passed, I was working full time and I was studying like what, 4 or 5 hours a day, and then all day on the weekends. When would I have had time to go back and try to tab out some books? Like, but also I just think that like switching things up like that just adds to the anxiety that you already feel. Because now you're like, well, shit, if everybody else is going to do open book, I have to make the sacrifices to do this open book. But I just don't get why you would do an open book.
It's gonna. I
I don't
have
know
a
what this means. I'm completely confused by
Well,
the
the way that
concept.
it's all essay. Indiana does its own thing anyway, so it's going to be all essays. They're not going to be doing a multiple choice. I believe it's just a 1 day essay exam, and it's just going to be their own
Okay.
essays. They don't get anything from the UBE. Indiana's always been doing its own thing,
Well, that's
and
good.
they actually Indiana is one of the few states where they have their own Indiana bar review. Bar prep that is just like kind of the thing that everybody does because they do their own thing. They're whatever. Indiana's fine,
That's
but
fine.
for the point for the part the way that they're gonna do this is they're basically going to email the bar taker in the morning section of questions, and then you have until whatever lunchtime to complete it. You have to turn in your answers. You email them back your answers. You don't upload them somewhere. You
Okay.
email them your answers,
Very
and then
secure.
and they give you the schedule, and it's like at 12:45 we'll email you the afternoon, and you have until like 4:45 to complete it. Now, I do believe that Tom McMasters was like, guys, here's the thing. If you have hundreds of people emailing at the same time, this could also be a problem. And who's going through 400? Like, this is crazy. Like, the whole thing is insane. I don't know if it's actually going to happen because, like, one of the most insidious parts of this whole process is instead of doing the right thing, which is diploma privilege, these states have just been coming up with all these crazy things for a couple states. I believe Tennessee was one, maybe Kentucky was one. They literally waited until 12 days before the bar exam to tell them that they were canceling it and going remote. New York, when they canceled a couple weeks ago, maybe it was only a week ago, like this pandemic, time has no meaning. But
Right.
when New York canceled, they didn't say what they were doing. They were like, we'll get back to you. We'll let you know. But on the day that they canceled it, they didn't tell anybody what their plan was. Texas came up with this asinine pandemic proof plan where it's remote, but in a hotel somehow. So everybody is going to be sent to various hotels. They each get a hotel room for 2 days. They check into the room. They have to use the stupid ass hotel Wi-Fi, which if you've ever been in the Hampton Inn in
Come on
Carbondale,
now.
Illinois, you know it sucks. And I don't know if Abilene, Texas, Hampton Inn and Suites has really great Wi-Fi or whatever. They say you can bring your own Ethernet cable. So y'all, if you're taking the Texas bar exam, please bring an Ethernet cable. I think you'll
Wired internet
wire it
only.
in, girls and boys and non-binary folks. And so basically, you're going to have to sit at your desk in a hotel room that may or may not have been sanitized because we've seen that a lot of people are not working in hotels. Like people don't want to go back and work there, so they are understaffed. And this actually happened to somebody who had to check into a hotel for one of the in-person bar exams. I saw on Twitter, I can't remember what state it was, but they got to the hotel and they weren't able to check in because there weren't enough housekeepers to clean the rooms. So tell me, if you don't even have enough people to clean the rooms, that they're really going through and deep cleaning all these rooms. I don't buy it.
When they weren't doing that before the
Right.
pandemic.
They weren't, and they're not now. So these people are going to have to sit in a room with the door open with a proctor watching them to make sure that they don't cheat. And like, we don't know if they've put everybody in the same hotels. Like, where we don't know where the hotels even are. We don't know how many people are going to be on a floor, if they're reserving entire floors. Because you don't want to be like the person who's next to the sex people while you're trying to take the bar exam, or somebody's got their kids in there. Who knows what's going on? But
Right.
that's the pandemic proof Texas remote test. Now, I want to talk
Okay.
again about another one of the big inequities of this remote, not just the access, it's for people with disabilities or for people who need accommodations. So, California, I believe, is one of these states. There's a couple states where, and there's some like Johnny Carver is one of the main kind of real like fighters for folks with disabilities and things like that, because they're just not being part of the conversation
Mm-hmm.
at all. If you need an accommodation, like, it's already almost inhumane. It is inhumane, because I was coaching somebody today. Hey, Randa. Um, about like how, like, I'm like, look, you're gonna have to learn how to just sit and not do anything, because she's like, what do I do? Like, I like to like trace the words on the screen, or I'm looking around, or I'm thinking, or just like sitting back in my chair or something. Like, you're going to have to literally learn how to just sit completely still, because if your face moves out of registration, you get flagged for AI. Now, if you happen to be a person who has a disability or is unable to sit for long periods of time, or you're pregnant and you need more bathroom breaks, or you're lactating and you need, like, they're not making accommodations for any of these folks. Basically what they said in California is, if you need accommodations, you can take the remote test in a hotel room. So they're forcing people to go into an in-person test to have their accommodations, and they're not giving people extra time on the exam or anything like that. So it's it's so inequitable, and we don't even have the tech sorted. Like, uh, Nevada still, I haven't been on Twitter because I've been doing this, so I don't know what the situation as of right now, 5:17 Central Time on July 31st, what's going on in Nevada, whether they've decided to cancel, whether they're going to push it to February, cuz right now we know that we already have, we're going to have many cases of COVID 19 from the in person bar exams. We know it's going to happen because it already has. Um, and we know that the Michigan test was a harbinger of doom. That was a test of just a few hundred people. When you're talking about the bulk of these online tests are scheduled for October of this year, and people don't have scratch paper, they're talking about, like, you can't even have any writing implements. You're not allowed to have any food or beverages. You have to literally, like, empty, like, you have to sit in you have to have an enclosed space. If somebody walks into the room, fail. Baby comes into the room, fail. Husband comes in to bring you a cup of tea, fail. Dog gets into the shot, fail. They literally want you, like, wherever you're at, you have to, like, completely clear the wall behind you. You have to clear out everything in the room, as if people just have all these extra spare rooms. And, like, some law schools, some bar associations are like, yeah, well, we'll give you space, but the whole point is we don't want to have to get on public transportation to go take the bar exam at Brooklyn Law School or at NYU or wherever. I don't want to have to expose myself. So this is still not a solution. And the issue is, we don't know what this test is even going to look like, because some of these bar examiners haven't told us how they're testing. Like, what's it going to look like? How is it going to work? Is there going to be an ability to cut and paste? Will you have a dual screen? Now, they said there'll be virtual scrap paper. Do you mean a Word document that you'll have on a 13-inch screen next to your MPT? How the hell are you going to do an MPT without scratch paper, y'all? How
I
the
don't
hell are you?
know.
How are you going to do the MBE without scratch paper? Because they're doing the MBE. Like, the states that have opted for the October remote exam are using UBE materials for the most part. There may be some outliers there, but for the most part, they're using the National Conference of Bar Examiners materials, which means the multi-state performance test, the multi-state essay exam, and the multi-state bar exam. Now, they're only doing one MPT, and maybe, I don't know if they're doing the full 6 essays or if they're only doing 3 essays, but they are doing 100 MBE questions. We've never seen a remote MBE ever. It's never been done.
Wait, so okay, okay. This is too much. It shouldn't be happening. I'm sorry, we are in a pandemic. It certainly shouldn't be happening now, but I just want to reiterate, this shit shouldn't be happening at any time. This is not the time to do the gatekeeping. The gatekeeping needs to happen at the law schools. We need to gatekeep the law schools, not the people who spent their money, spent their time. We just got to do more. We got to do better. And it takes licensed attorneys to go out there and say this. We can't expect people who are scared that they may not be admitted into the profession to go out here and risk their profession to point out these inequities. I mean, there's always going to be some people who do that, and I love those people. But it's just not likely that most people who are graduating are gonna push back because I mean, just think about like the stuff that you were saying about on Twitter where licensed attorneys are like going and attacking recent graduates and telling them you'll never get a job. I would never hire you. You need to go through the same bullshit I went through. Like, why? Like as we progress, we should progress. You know, we've been through it. I I have no qualms saying there should not be a bar exam. You graduated
Agreed.
from law school, your law school should have prepared you to be an attorney. They should have taught you how to go to court. They should have taught you about pleadings. They should have made it to where you can walk into a law firm and you can start working. This whole like extended 7-Eleven, this you might be a law clerk, but you got a law degree, but it's not your choice, or you can go and risk death, is not okay.
Right.
And it's just it's not okay now. It won't be okay when the pandemic is over in 10 years. It just won't be okay. Like
Right.
we need to, and we need to take like it's just it really I hate that we didn't as a profession take some time to think about what's going on. I mean, the National Conference of Bar Examiners is in Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah. We forgot to mention that. Why
It's
is
in
that
Wisconsin.
relevant? Diploma privilege? Wait a second. So you're telling me that the lady who is in charge of the NCBE ain't never had to sit for no bar exam? What?
Right.
The
And so,
hypocrisy.
and the fact that they are fixing their Twitter fingers and their letter writing fingers to say these things like, oh, you definitely need the bar exam. Well, why? Why do we need the bar exam? What does that say about the ABA? What does that say about these state
Oh,
Supreme
I'm
Courts?
glad you
What does
brought
it
up
say
the
about
ABA.
them?
I'm glad you brought up the ABA because the day after, I believe it was yesterday. So, yesterday was the day after 22 states had an in person bar exam during an ongoing global pandemic. The ABA is having their annual meeting, and they got together, and in 12 hours, they really got serious. And they wrote up a resolution wherein they said, you know what? Maybe no in person bar exams during the pandemic. But why, pray tell, did they wait until after the bar exams were held in 22 states before they put that resolution up? And it still hasn't been voted on. And I just would like to point out that the NCBE is fighting very hard because the resolution actually does say maybe diploma privilege, row? Maybe some diploma privilege though. Like they put it in there, but apparently NCBE is really fighting hard to get that cut out and
Axed.
just say let's not have a bar exam in 2021 in person. Well, duh, we really shouldn't do that because in Illinois, I'd like to point out that our numbers are going up. We had the highest rate of COVID-19 infections in Illinois today since back in May at the height when things were starting to go down. So we are not looking good, y'all. Chicago is moving backwards. Illinois is moving backwards. We know that Florida is a hot spot. Arizona is a hot spot. California is a hot spot. New York is going to be a hot spot again. When it
Texas.
yeah, all of these things are happening. When is the next examination to be held? October. So, October, we know that there's going to be another big wave. We're not through with the first wave, but we know there's going to be another big wave. There's going to be shutdowns and lockdowns happening right up in the time when we're supposed to be administering a remote bar exam. The bandwidth is not going to be there. We know the technology is not going to be there. There's going to be a lot of bar exams getting cut. Like I just want to point out that Louisiana, yes, they did come out and they did grant emergency diploma privilege, yes, but they still waited until just a couple weeks before the exam was supposed to happen before they did that. They could have done that back in April, back in March, back at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning when we knew there was a global pandemic. A lot of these states are waiting until a week or two before the bar exams to cancel or to change them. It's unconscionable. It's not right. I have become radicalized. I am a bar exam abolitionist. I don't care who knows it. Come at me, bro. Put it in the comments. You're going to hurt my feelings. I am a woman in America. I have gotten way worse than that. So now that we have discussed the bar exam, I think it's time that we turn to a happier subject, which is this week's culinary assassination challenge.
So, um, I was feeling, I don't know, sad because we're in a pandemic. And baking is my happy place. And I really wanted some brioche. Um, and I found this super easy recipe. I was kind of skeptical because the brioche I've made in the past is like taking so much work. It's been super expensive to make, but it's been delicious. So I was like, okay, I'll try this one out. This is some super easy brioche, and it was so good. I used half of it to make cinnamon rolls, and then the
Mm.
other half I used my pan de mie pan to make
Oh.
a pull apart loaf. Now,
Oh, yes. That is genius. See, this is why we're friends because you be coming up and dropping like some crazy but please cuz like my panties are moistening so I need more information.
so my grandma, who is staying with me, had tried this like commercially produced brioche, and she told me she hated brioche. Now, me, my grandma, I come from a butter and richness loving family. So for my grandma to say she hated brioche just
That
didn't
hurts
make
my
any
heart.
sense.
That hurts my soul.
Well, I was like, I don't know what's going on here, but that's clearly not true. So I decided to make her some brioche. My sister wanted some cinnamon rolls, so I made those. And my grandma was like, you could make this bread every week and I'd eat it all. And I'm right there with her because with butter, without butter, on its own, dipped in anything, just cold, hot, whatever, toasted anyway. It was delicious. The crumb was perfect. And it was just like the easiest brioche I've made. So
Oh.
I'm challenging you to one, make the brioche. Two, I want you to build on what I did. I don't just want a regular
Okay.
cinnamon roll.
Okay.
I want you to use your status as the cardamom queen to make me a
Oh.
delicious cardamom based cinnamon roll. And
Hmm.
I want a more interesting pull apart loaf.
Okay. An interesting pull apart loaf. And yes, I'd like to give a shout out to my friends Sherry and Josh who brought me back some excellent cardamom directly from India, like right as they were escaping, right at the height of the pandemic. And I will be using my beautiful, I have both green and black cardamom. So, like, there's an opportunity there. Yes, yes, challenge accepted. I'm very excited about this challenge. Now, the way that this is going to work going forward is we want everybody to join us on this culinary journey because we know that at the beginning of this pandemic everybody was pandemic baking, and I know because y'all didn't leave me any yeast or any flour at all, so I had to use the yeast that I bought in 2014, which still worked, but it wasn't ideal. And now I have a 24-pound jug, well, not jug, but it's like a freaking huge, it's like those drums that they play, and the street drummers are like the bucket
The
drums. It's a
buckets.
24-pound bucket of flour because I'm ready. And I had to buy 3 pounds of yeast, which I gave some to Robert because we need that yeast, but I got yeast for days. So are there any challenges I should be aware of when I'm making this brioche? You said it was like a slow fermentation process.
So, yes. I mean, I guess you could like do it like in the morning or whatever and just like let it sit for a few hours. I like a good like 8 to 12 to 24 hour slow ferment in the fridge. Um, if you're gonna make it in the morning, make sure the night before you like set your eggs on the counter, set your butter out on the counter. Um, but honestly, it was just so simple. Like I made it in my KitchenAid. I'm thinking about trying it by hand, like to
Mm.
enrich it through kneading because it was a nice, soft, supple dough,
Oh.
and it baked up super nice.
Mm.
And because you only use the egg yolks um, in the bread, I used the egg whites for my egg wash, and everything came out shiny and beautiful
Oh,
and a lovely brown.
yes. Oh, I'm salivating here. It is getting to be my dinner time because I'm old as shit and I like to eat dinner around 5:30 at the old country buffet. So,
Oh, the other day I was talking about one of my old favorite restaurants, and it was hilarious because most of the people I tell have never heard of this restaurant. Luby's. Have you heard of Luby's?
I feel like I've heard of it maybe only because you mentioned it in passing.
Okay. So one of my friends, I mean, I have several friends from Texas because of college, but one of my friends, I was like, man, I was just telling somebody about Luby's the other day. And he was like, oh, yeah, because Luby's is all over Texas. And he was like, did you like Luby's? I was like, I only liked one thing at Luby's. And he was like, oh, yeah, the Jello. And this is why I think I'm going to be a perfect old person. I love Jello. I love mashed potatoes. I love mushy food.
I
But
love
when I was a
mashed
kid,
potatoes.
I would beg my grandma to take me to Luby's.
To get that Jello?
She would force me to eat a salad. I might eat whatever food was there, and then I would go ham on this Jello because they would have blue, red, green,
Mm.
orange, this weird lime Jello salad thing. Like it was Jello for days, and I would go ham. So if you are when the pandemic is over, go to Luby's and get that Jello.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, y'all. Anybody, I would like to tell people who are taking the pandemic proof bar exam in Texas that, you know, if you need someplace to go to lunch, make sure to get that Jello at Luby's. Um,
They do
that
not
wraps.
sponsor us. I just love Jello.
Please, Luby's, we'll take that money. If you want to sponsor us, hit us up. We are the Sous chefs. And this is going to wrap up for our first episode, but I would love to challenge. We will put the recipe for this week's Culinary Assassination Challenge in the comments so you can all try to make your own cardamom cinnamon rolls or delicious pull apart brioche. Tell us how it goes. We'll be very interested. Send us some pictures. If we like what we see, we might give you a shout out. But that's it for this week. I've been Kimber.
And I'm always Robert.
And we'll see you next time on The Sous Chefs.